Our next speaker is Bob Dudley. He's a senior biomedical engineer with Safe-Decon, specializing in autoclave systems and thermal sterilization science. He's particularly focused on improving the safety and efficacy of decontamination processes within these critical settings. Hey,
We are not showing the slide ones.
oh, I'm gonna reshare. Fine. Mm. 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 Now?
Hey. Morning, everybody. Bob Dudley. Been a background on me. I've been a biomedical engineer technician. Started off in the wonderful world of the hospitals, working on surgery equipment. Then one day someone says, "Hey, Bob, can you work on an autoclave?" And that was probably the biggest mistake in my life. I said, "Well, sure, I'll do that. Why not?" Then I fixed it. And that was when my life just changed at that point, because then I found out there's not too many people that know how to work or fix on them. About a year after that, got a call from Torrey Pines Institute, asked me, "Hey, Bob, we heard about you. Fix autoclaves. Can you come on in?" Sure, come on in. Fixed it, got into the academia and into life sciences that way. I kind of liked it. A little bit of a nerdy person, just real quick. I love what everybody does. I research. I like to know what everybody does. So I started asking a lot of questions. As I got more into the sterilization decontamination, I started realizing that there's some really, really big, serious problems in the industry. And as I got into it, I developed even more. So with that, I want to talk about the sterilization of the waste and start talking about when you run your liquid cycles, how an autoclave works. What I found out through speaking is most people have no idea how that magical box actually works or why. Everybody just knows that you stick the stuff in it and you hit the button and everything comes out and you're safe and sound. I'm here to tell you that's not necessarily the case, and it's not progressing. The page isn't progressing. I can't get it off of there. Yeah, yep. Well, with the, oh, I see, never mind. They got it. Yeah, it had I had a laser pointer on there and they took it off, but that's okay. So today I want to take a kind of a deep dive and I want to explain to you why the autoclave works, what happens to it, why steam, why not dry air. And then I'm going to give you some of the testing and explain some things so that you have a better understanding. The more you understand this, the better you're going to understand what you're trying to accomplish, whether you're trying to sterilize your utensils or your instruments, sterilizing liquids, and then even sterilizing your waste. This is one of the major things that people just don't understand. It's more than just a magical box. The autoclave, probably one of the most critical pieces of equipment. It takes care of everything. It literally just deneutralizes, breaks down your proteins, kills everything. None of your experiments would actually work without it, without having autoclaves. You couldn't go through surgery without it and not getting infections. It is a very important part. For those that are in life science, especially when you get into the high containment type BSL labs, that's your last line of defense. You're coming out of your environmental cabinet, out of your room, into your hallways. The last part is the autoclave. You have to get it right. I have been exposed several times and it gets interesting, you know, and it's especially when you're quarantined. Lab leaks on average, 20 to 30 a year are reported. Most of these are from lack of sterilization coming out of the autoclave. This is some of the common mistakes that you see for it are just poor preparation, bad loading, misplaced biologicals, and just a lack of bad knowledge. People get behind, they start stacking bags in, and you're just not going to get it. And we're going to go through this and it'll explain it when we get there. The autoclave. It's one of the favorites of everybody. Every time I come in, everybody grumbles about it. But on a conceptual basis, it's just really, really a simple thing. It's a pressure cooker, just like you have at home. It just does really, really fancy stuff now. Years ago, when I first got into it, I ran into some of the older autoclaves. You had three little knobs. You just turned it on, had a little timer. It rang. You just opened up another valve. You shut off this one, and it just works. Now, as you know, they've become more complicated. Now there's more sensors, more probes, load probes and everything else. But conceptually, what it does is actually quite very, very simple. So today, what I want to talk to is steam and why we use it. Why not just regular dry stuff? Steam saturation and why it's important. And when we get into the testing, you'll see the difference between steam saturation and what it is. I also want to speak to the pressure and the vacuum and the effects it has on liquids and your waste, so that you have a really good understanding of that. The cycles and their purpose and the effects on the contents. This is important because I see whenever I go places, people not using the right cycle for what they're trying to accomplish, which in turn ends up not getting the result that you're looking for. If you're doing your waste, you want that predictable outcome. You want that to come out absolutely sterile. You do not want stuff to come out of your labs. If you're sterilizing liquids, I've run into people and seen some interesting stuff. I could probably write a book on the things that I've seen, but people have run their liquid cycles trying to do their liquids and finding out that they're ruining experiments. You have $1 million experiments, and the last thing you want to do is run it incorrectly or run it wrong and ruin your experiment to get different results that you're not looking for. Then I'm going to get into the testing cycles that I've run. I'll break it down so that you guys understand what you're seeing, and then you'll have a better understanding of what you need to do in order to get the results that you're looking for. The testing results, conclusions, and questions. Steam, understanding basic steam. Why do we use steam in the autoclaves? It's very, very simple. Steam is actually the hammer to the heat nail. Steam is something that when you have something that you're putting in it is cooler, steam will naturally attract and attack that cool, whatever that's cool is. So when you're running your cycle and you're putting it under pressure, not only is that pressure condensing in, but it's driving that steam, which is pulling the heat in. For those that have been in hospital situations, you know that they run their autoclaves every morning. They have to run a Bowie Dick. What they're looking for is the deep penetration of the steam to make sure that you get in your packs. You have ortho packs, you have different operating packs that they seal up. They have to make sure that that's going to get the steam deep in. In life sciences, they don't run the Bowie Dicks because they're generally running, so you don't know if you're actually getting it. And I found that most people do not have that understanding of the penetration of the steam. That is where it's critical, the penetration of the steam. But without it, if you just use just regular dry heat, what ends up happening is you have to bake it from the outside in, where steam actually drives in and pulls it into wherever you're trying to penetrate into. Steam saturation or humidity. Steam saturation is just how much liquid is in it. Steam is a gas. It's gas, it's water turned into gas, but it has a certain amount of humidity to it. This is very, very critical. And we're going to get into why I believe that adding liquid to a bag is very, very dangerous. It's going to give you a false negative. I'll explain this later. Steam saturation on an autoclave when it's working correctly is between 3 and 5%. Less than 3%, you might as well just stick it in your oven at home and bake it, and good luck to you. You're not probably going to get the the amount of penetration. It will take a longer time with it. When your steam saturation is above 7%, now it's becoming too humid. And what ends up happening is when you start to drive and it starts driving into the pack, steam, when it hits something cold, condensates. It turns to water. Water is an insulator. It will keep the heat from actually penetrating into the packs or into wherever you're trying to get in. You're trying to get it to penetrate into. So the whole idea is to get steam in there, but just control just how much. You put too much and now you're not going to get any penetration. That liquid will build up on there and that heat will just literally just kind of hang on. So let's get into real quick. I want to talk about the heat, the effects of pressure and heat and liquids before I get into the cycles so that people can have a good general understanding. The chart to your left here, this is when pressure is being applied. Your average pressure here is about 14, it's 14 PSI, for your atmospheric pressure. When you get to here, a lot of people don't realize that as pressure increases, so does your boiling point. So when you're trying to run your liquids, let's say you're sterilizing your media, you're sterilizing your water, you can't lose it. If it boils out. It turns into just an eruption. So if you add water to the bag, is it producing steam? The answer is absolutely not. It won't do it. Anybody that runs their liquid cycles, the liquid will not boil. As the pressure is applied, you get it up to 15 PSI or 121 Celsius, which is 250 Fahrenheit. What ends up happening is it contains, the pressure actually contains it to keep it from boiling. You're saying, okay, Bob, I just want to boil this thing. I'll just cook it at a higher temperature. Higher temperature, higher pressure means your boiling point is going to change. So if you run it at the max that an autoclave can run, which is at 34 PSI or 274, 134, the boiling point is now 1 or 2 degrees higher. So at 121, your boiling point runs 122 to 123. It doesn't boil. It just sits there. So, and anybody that's run a liquid cycle realizes that. On the other side, when you look at the other side, this is your vacuum here. So when you're at atmospheric, again, the boiling point is at 212. But then you start pulling a vacuum. And when the autoclave starts going into the vacuum, and most autoclaves should be able to pull between a 25 and 29 inches of vacuum. At 30 inches of vacuum, you're at the vacuum of space. But you can see the number here. And like I said, threw these things on here real quick. I didn't convert them to Celsius, but when you get to 25 inches of vacuum, you now have a boiling point of 132. At 29 inches, it's 80 degrees. The water's boiling off and turning to gas again. This is important when I get into your cycles. This will all make sense why this is so critical. So let's get into understanding the cycles. I have this basic chart here, and we're going to focus on 3 of them, which is the gravity, the liquid, and the pre-vac. You'll see it's up here as a pulse. What generally happens, especially if you get any liquids in here, and I've had people run these cycles of gravity by mistake for a liquid. But if you look, this little section here that you see, that is generally where they do the purge. And the purge, when it goes in, it preheats the autoclave. It takes all the cool spaces out of all the chamber, and then it starts working to warm up whatever is on there, whatever is in there. So then you have, let me get this to go, and you'll see where it climbs up. And you'll notice that the climb up, it actually on a gravity, it's slow, methodical, and it goes in phases until you reach your temperature. And I keep losing that. So then you run your sterilization, whatever it is. As we all know, at 15 PSI, at 15 minutes, you should be able to kill pretty much everything, all your gram negatives, viruses, spores, and everything. That's generally the case with this. Now, if you had any liquids in here on a gravity, and gravity is pretty much how it works. The valve opens, the steam comes in, you run your sterilization, it opens it up, and then it drops off. It's at this point, when it drops off, if you have any liquids in there and you open that valve, the temperature of that water, it's not boiling yet, but the minute you release that pressure, it's instant volcano. It literally, at the snap of your finger, will just absolutely erupt. Anybody that's tried to do liquids in their autoclave and run it on this cycle, you end up with almost no liquid in your beaker, flask, or anything. Everybody has seen it. You open the door and it goes, where'd all my water go? Media is everywhere. It explodes all over the place. That's because the boiling point is now back to 2, but it's at 250. So it's an instantaneous hard boil. And anybody that's made the mistake of running it and you have liquids and you have that high temperature in there and you make the mistake of opening the door, that steam will come out the door and it pulls the water and you scald yourself. So you have to be very, very careful when you're running your liquids, and you have to run it on the proper cycle. This can be actually dangerous. I've actually seen this happen a few times. So we want to get into liquids. A liquid cycle, they run this, and that's pretty much on purpose. You'll see that it's almost identical the way it starts with the gravity. It's going to gradually come up. It's going to reach the sterilization temperature. And then you're going to see the difference between here and here, the ramp down. A lot of autoclaves, they're designed to release the pressure as the temperature comes down at the same time. Generally, you're still going to get a little bit of boiling at the end of it, but it should ramp down. Your autoclave should ramp it down by 1/2 of a PSI per minute. That gives that temperature time to come down. It's never perfect, but you're going to get a little bit of liquid loss. But once it gets down and achieves it, then this is where you're at. The pulse here, or the pre-vac cycle, this is the champ. This is something that they finally came up with because they realized that they needed something to really kind of drive things in. What you have here, and this is what I prefer people to use on their waste, especially if they have to do it. But let me explain what happens here. You have the purge come in, and you see how sharp these lines are, and they go from pressure down to vacuum, pressure, vacuum. And what that's doing is when you have a pre-vac cycle, so you pre-warm everything up. Now what happens is you're going to put the pressure in. It's going to squeeze it. The steam's going to drive in. It starts penetrating. It turns to liquid. So now you're blocking the steam from actually penetrating what you're trying to get it into. So they came up with a way to pull a vacuum. And you have to remember, when you start pulling vacuum, you start getting down your boiling point. Now everything turns to steam. So now you get the penetration, turns to water, it blocks the heat from getting in and penetrating. Then what ends up happening is you pull the vacuum, it dissipates, it boils off, turns back to steam, it's sucked down the drain. Now the second pulse comes in, and now it starts driving in. Now here comes the hammer to the nail. Steam starts coming in, pressure starts coming in, and now it comes in deeper. And this is where the Bowie Dick comes into play. This is what they're looking for. You're looking for that deep penetration. And you can see just how quickly that they go up and down. Literally, these cycles, you should be reaching pressure and reaching vacuum within 45 seconds to a minute if your autoclave is actually correct. And it is a brutal, violent forcing in and pulling out, and it just drives that steam in deeper and deeper. And then you have a very quick ramp up, and your autoclave will get almost up to sterilization with the pre-vac, and then it'll pause, especially when you're doing the scientific. You're going to get about a 10-minute pause, and your autoclave should be checking pressure, temperature, and it actually, if they're newer, they'll work off of 5 different probes. And then when everything comes together, then it takes off and then you run your sterilization. And of course, at the end, you have the fast ramp down into a vacuum, and then you're able to pull all your liquids back out. So that is the basic understanding. Before I get into my testing, does anybody have any questions that they have or on this? Because this is the prelude to some of the testing that I've been doing here. I ran a test because I keep running into what I think are kind of like wives' tales or myths. Adding water to a bag, closing it off because it's going to produce steam. You're going to get a better effect with it. And so what I do is I have a autoclave at my warehouse, and I just start running things. So as people come to me with problems, I start, okay, that doesn't make sense. Let me see if I can make sense out of this thing. So then I started running this liquid. So I have my 2 milliliter bag. I have one of my Safe-Decon, the ovals that I run it in. And then I hear a lot about these here. These are these are the chemical test strips that you see. And everybody's like, well, Bob, I put my test strip in. We're going to bust this myth really good today, because just because it turns does not mean that you got the time in at it. And you'll see here in a minute. And then I ran my A-type biological indicators, and then I have my my beaker full. And I had I used the SOP that was recommended by the CDC and NIH, which is the adding of the water. So let's get started. What I ended up doing is I created a challenge pack for this. I took essentially a Bowie Dick pack, and then I created a little space in here for the Bowie for the biological indicator. And then I put a steam strip in there just to see if I could get steam to go in here. And for most of them, I didn't tape them down. I used this as a hinge. This I ended up taping down on 2 of them to pack it down and make it as tight as I could. These were the challenge packs that I used. So, wrong way. So here we go. On my first one, I had no trash in it. I just basically had plastic bags. I sealed up the wet bag because that's what you're trying to put the water in. Had 100 milliliters of warm water in it. I had a little piece of plastic that was about a 4x4 piece of hard plastic that I could autoclave. I taped the biological indicator down to it, and I ran it. And then you can see the results. My control got positive, so we got good BIs. You can see down here in the bottom, this is what the chemical test strip looks like. Here we go. Good test strips. They ran. This one got a little bit wet on the dry bag. The wet bag opened up at some point during the cycle. This was a pre-vac 40 sterilization cycle. And what I ran is, and I gotta get my cheaters on here, it was a 3-minute purge, 4 pulse precondition, 40-minute sterilization, 10-minute drying. We got the kill. Everybody loves to see purple. So then I decided, I said, okay, let me run a gravity cycle the same way. It was the same identical setup, 3-minute purge, 40-minute sterilization, a 5-minute dry at the end on the gravity. Same, no trash, 1 piece of hard plastic in the bag. This bag was open. This bag was sealed wet, and it ruptured again during the process. When I got to the liquid, I did run 1 liquid just to kind of see what would happen. But if you're trying to run your waste, the liquid cycle is probably the biggest nightmare, especially if you're going to put the liquids in the bag, because it'll never boil and never produce steam. But you're going to see the results here as I bring it to more and more of a challenge. So I ran the liquid. It was a 3-minute purge, 40 minutes. It went through. Here we go. So now I'm going to run the light trash, and I didn't put much trash. I filled the capacity of everything, the same amount of trash in the bags at 10% trash in it. And it replicated basically the same waste that you would have in your labs. So this had 10% capacity on the bag, not much trash. This is where things start, even with just a little bit of trash, start going downhill quick. I ran the pre-vac, the bags burst. This was an open bag and this was a sealed wet. Purple's good. We love to see it. When I ran the gravity cycle on this bag did not burst. It had 100 milliliters of water, got a failed BI. Look at your test strip. It got a little bit wet here, but you got the okay, but it was kind of light. So the seal bag, I went ahead and I sealed up the dry bag to see what would happen with it. It burst during the cycle. Safe-Decon product, it went through. Now I get into a pre-vac cycle. And now I'm using the packs that you just seen. Now we need to start getting penetration. This isn't just surface. This isn't just surface warfare, so to speak. Now you're having to get something to where it needs to penetrate. You need to penetrate, excuse me. I ran the pre-vac. It was a precondition. And then I did the packs just like you seen them. I just flipped them over, didn't seal them down tight. Now you're starting to see some problems here. This was a pre-vac 40. I can get my dart here. And you see that these two bags, both of these bags did burst. But the question is where did they burst? Did they burst in the pre-vac or did they burst at the end? There's really not much way for me to tell unless I had a load probe in there or if I, had some type of detection. But unfortunately, mine is an older Steris V120 and it didn't have any load probes. But now you're starting to see it. But look at your tapes here. Didn't kill the BI, but look, your tapes, these are your chemical tapes. When I see people using chemical tapes, I please don't do it, please. And the Safe-Decon one, that managed to get through just fine. So now this is another one that I ran. This is, wrong way. Let's see here. So, no, I'm sorry. Pre-vac, the cycle 6, I did run with the seal bag. This is the one I actually ran and I taped it down. So it was just a really, really hard challenge. So, wrong way again here. I'm good at that. Cycle 7, these were sealed down. It was completely taped shut. And this was a gravity 40. You can see that everything was kind of light. The bags burst. The dry bag burst. The wet sealed one didn't. And you can see kind of some color changes in your strips. On the Safe-Decon, we got really good steam penetration. And this was on the end. This is on the outside of the pack, inside the pack, as you can see. So we were getting the steam to it. We got the steam to here, but we didn't get to really the penetration. And I don't know how much of this was it just built up just a lot of wetness to it. So you can see that all three failed. This was on a gravity 40. You're getting steam in there, but it just doesn't penetrate long enough. So now I went ahead and I unsealed it and I just left it. Now I'm going to run it again. I'm going to run the same one, the same cycle with the packs, but now I'm going to unseal it. This wet bag did burst on this one. The bag burst, but still we got steam penetration here. You can see your test strips are all looking wonderful, but your BI failed on the wet. The dried bag, it ended up rupturing, probably ruptured in the very beginning, as you can see by the steam, the steam strips that we did get plenty of steam in there. The Safe-Decon one also, that one worked good and we were able to get the kill on that one. Gravity again, this is where I have a problem with people running the gravity. If you're going to run gravity, you're just going to have to run it for a very, very, very long time. And you can see here, 3-minute purge, 40-minute sterilization. So these two, you can see that they were kind of light. This bag did burst on the wet bag. They did burst a lot. You can see the outside of it. I think the test strip probably just got wet. The inside was showing this was actually next to the BI. It's showing you that, yep, we got the steam. We got the steam, we got the heat. Didn't make it. So one more. So now you're saying, okay, let's run it a little bit longer and see what happens. So what I ended up doing here is I switched on the last two and this one, I went to a 200 50 milliliters of water, which was what was recommended. Then I ran the pre-vac cycle. The wet bag here, as you can see, we got good penetration. These bags did break. Safe-Decon worked like it's supposed to, and but you can see that we got the good steam, and then we got the good BIs. I ran the same cycle with the gravity packs not sealed, just folded over. The sealed bag did not burst, and though it's showing that steam and temperature made it, we ended up with a positive BI. So that sealed wet bag, it burst. In fact, it was all over the place inside the autoclave on that one. So when it burst, it went literally everywhere. So what I want to get to here real quick is just some observations and conclusions that I came to. During the pre-vac cycle, the wet bag, it ruptured about 90% of the time. Adding water to the bag seemed to hinder especially when you're trying to do dense loads. If you're doing surface stuff, it didn't matter whether you had water in it or not, but it just seemed to hinder it quite a bit. The pre-vac, the sealed container, which is my product, it was 100% effective on the pre-vac. The wet bag was 60% effective, 60%. You're only successful 6 out of 10 on a wet bag on a pre-vac cycle. And then the sealed dry bag with no water in it actually was 80% effective on my runs. So you're actually more effective by not adding water to it on the pre-vac. The gravity sealed, the container was 80%. It failed on the tightly packed. Both the wet and dry bags were only 40%. 4 out of 10 were getting the kill. That's not good, especially when you know that your stuff has to come out. You have to get it dead coming out. It should be noted that the pre-vac bags, they ruptured 90% of the time. The dry bags only ruptured about 60%. The wet bags are going to produce steam at some point, but the question is where does it do it? Does it do it in the pre-vac? Probably not. That's probably why you're getting a lot of failure. During the pre-vac, the water is not able to get the steam penetration. Remember, steam's going to go after that water because it's cooler. Because it's in a sealed bag, no steam can actually penetrate. You have to, in order for everything to work, you need your contents to be susceptible to that steam and pressure. Plastic bags are an insulator. Water is an insulator. So if you use the bags and you seal them up and you use the water, you're causing it to actually get to sterilization slower. My guess is that most of these is when it gets into sterilization, that water gets to temperature and you get that sudden drop, boom, there goes the bag, because now everything's getting hot and it explodes and now your bag's blown up, but now you're not getting it. It's going to sense that steam in that bag and on your chemical strips. You're not going to get it. You're just not going to get it unless you're getting your BIs. If you're not putting BIs in there and you're using the test strips, please stop. You're as you can see, it's not working very well. So I want to get to some of the fixes. One of the things that I've noticed, and especially in academia, I mean, it's notorious because there's so much turnover, is proper training. I can't tell you how many times I've gone into a facility and seen some of the craziest things. And they were like, well, this is what I was trained to do. This is what I was told. And what generally happens is I've noticed that the technician before them comes in and then they train the next technician that's coming on board and so forth. And one poor student, bless her heart, she was trying to do 5 liters of water for sterilization. She puts it into the autoclave. I happen to be walking in and I'm observing her, which is what I like to do. And she has a 100 milliliters beaker of water off to the side with the load probe in it. And I said, what are you doing? And she says, well, I'm autoclaving my liquids. I said, like that? I said, it'll never work. It was never explained to her. So I explained it. I said, why don't you put the load probe in? And this is the type of stuff that I did. And she goes, oh, so this is why my experiments are all not coming out, because no, you're not sterilizing your water, and now you're getting stuff, you know, when you're in your readings that you probably don't want. And so it was throwing off experiments and everything else. Training, especially in academia. Another thing that I did is you have to have solid and posted SOPs on these autoclaves. There are so many people that just walk up that do not understand. If you have a picture and you have an SOP that they can refer to, most of the time I go up to the autoclave, there's nothing, absolutely nothing. The places that I worked, that I did service work, I always requested that they would do the SOPs. A lot of times I made them up myself and I posted them just for the people, especially those that were struggling. Supervision and spot checking, there isn't any. I have traveled this whole country doing this. I mean, I've been from West Coast to East Coast, North, South. The one thing I can absolutely tell you is that the supervisors and the people in charge rarely take a look. And if it's like, please go look. When they open the door, look at what's going on. You have bags that are closed together. If you're going to pack the bags, you're limiting the amount of heat that can get to that bag, and especially the contents. Supervision is just very critical. You never want to stack bags on top of each other. That's another big no-no. Bags will insulate each other. You put two bags together, you have that much percentage that the heat can't reach. So now you're having to get it on the top and the bottom. If you really, really want to use water, and you really, really, you know, this is just something that you think that you absolutely have to do, even after seeing this, keep it to a couple tablespoons. Less is more. You don't want much water in it. And one of the reasons why is when I was doing this experiment, when I would pull the ruptured bag out, water would go all over the floor. It'd go all over my leg. It went everywhere. It's going to be hot. And you don't have the proper PPE to handle it when it leaks on you. You can't do that. And it may not be decontaminated, as you can see. So you may be spilling contaminated liquids on the floor and down your leg. Yeah, that's a good prospect. Yeah, that's yeah. Especially the hot water. That was really, really good. So if you're going to do the liquids and you have liquids in it, try to have some type of container that can contain it. So that way when you do pull it out, it's going to come out contained and cooler, and it's going to be something that's going to be a little bit less painful for the technician or the person pulling it out. So at this time, does anybody have any questions about this? Hopefully it all made sense. I tried to get through a lot of information very quickly. So.
Sure did. Questions from online, but let's see if there are any questions.
Yes.
I just had a quick question. Have you ever tested the potential of the effluent from an autoclave to be infectious? There was a paper that was published back in the 90s about when the vacuum's pulled, if there's aerosols in an autoclave chamber.
You're talking about, repeat again. So you're asking about
the effluent from an autoclave
Correct.
being potentially infectious
Yes.
when that vacuum is pulled.
It's so the effluent liquids, when you're pulling it out, and then that's pretty much going down the drain. If it's highly infectious, you should have an EDS system, especially if you are in a BSL lab. All that should be literally going down to EDS and being treated. Most of the time I see it, they do have EDS, and most of them, autoclaves now have a way to, they have an effluent system that it actually preheats that drain area so that when it comes in contact, that it's getting pretty much about 320-degree heat. So you have to remember, anything that's coming out of your steam generator, you have to remember it's 80 PSI or 100 PSI coming out of it. You're running like 380 degrees steam coming out of it. So even though your autoclave is, so they run direct steam into them. Most of them have that now. And of course, that was one of the things that was addressed. So if you have an older autoclave, probably not. Newer ones, yes, they do have effluent systems that can treat that. So anything else? Yes.
Can you briefly comment on
the differences between autoclaving? So you talked about like liquids and then, hard surfaces. What about fabric?
And this is something that fabric is almost very similar to tissue. I have a white paper on marine carcasses, because one of the problems with marine carcasses is when you have any kind of tissue or material, one of the problems that you have is that the tissue or the material will insulate liquid, liquid insulates it. So you have to kind of get it separated. And that's what I did with we're able to do carcasses now in under an hour. So we're getting a much more, it's a more consistent. In fact, it's been 100%. We have over 1,000. I went to University of Florida, Lake Nona, their BSL. I showed them how to run their scrubs. And of course, my favorite is when you wash out, you shower out and then you take your your towel and you dry off with sandpaper. We were actually able to stop that, and their scrubs and their towels are now lasting over a year. So, but there's a cycle that can be run, and I have set them up so that they're not destroying the scrubs. But to your point, they're able to take the wet towels and to process them. And I've run biological indicators and literally jammed it with wet towels inside. And then we run the pre-vac cycle with a drying at the end, and then they will come out dry. Sure. Anything else? Yes, ma'am.
So what is the best way to maintain a log? Because each lab will maintain a system.
Sorry, I can't hear you.
What is the best way to maintain a log sheet for a autoclave? So what are all the essential ingredients in that? Like if they encounter a problem, should they log in so the next user would?
Most people, and this is where your supervision comes into play, but most of my places, I made them keep a log of exactly what they ran. And that was for me, because I can make the repair if I know that what they're running or what they're running in it. Quite a few times I've gone into facilities and, Bob, no water. And then I find out that they're running the wrong cycle. So what I do is I go in, and this is a teachable moment, okay, you're running the wrong cycle. So they would have clipboards literally right beside, and I, set them up with clipboards and say, here, run it so I can see how many times you're running it. And that's good for the technician, because if he can see how many runs are being done, how often the autoclave is being processed, what's being processed, you have a better understanding of what people are trying to accomplish. And if you have a good technician, he's going to be interested in what you're trying to accomplish. He's not just going to come in and fix the autoclave. He's going to ask you what you're trying to accomplish. And that was something that I did as a technician. That's why I wanted to know what everybody was doing, because now I can make all your equipment fit what you're trying to do. What are you trying to accomplish? Because you can make that machine do multiple things. I mean, it's quite amazing. And your technician is the one that can make it happen. They're the ones that are supposed to have this knowledge. They're the ones that are saying, what are you doing? What are you trying to accomplish? Here, let me help you accomplish that. Let me alter your cycle. Let me fix this for you. Let me explain why, your liquids are doing what they are. That's what it is. So, anything else? Yes, ma'am.
Hey, Bob, I can stop by your table. Can you briefly describe your Safe-Decon product?
The Safe-Decon product is a, I designed it because after being exposed multiple times. So what my product does is it's a self-contained, you can drop it, it'll hold liquids. I mean, you can put anything in it. It's impermeable. It allows you to take the product from the point of generation. So whether it is something out in the field, or whether you're an environmental cabinet and you want to move it, now you can move it and put it into the autoclave and it's still sealed. This is about containment, especially in a lab area. You want that containment. If somebody drops it, no big deal. I had a technician, John, tall guy, clumsy, always falling over himself. And they were working on a Class A agent, military type stuff, and he was pulling the liquids in beakers and flasks out of the environmental cabinet. And true to John's form, he tripped over his booty, and he got it caught on his foot, and the Safe-Decon product went flying. It bounced on the floor against the wall, glass broke, liquids came out of it, of course, out of there, not out of the container. And then, of course, he panicked because now you have broken glass in a high containment with highly infectious military stuff that they were working on. And he looked, and he was able to just go pick the container up, put it in the autoclave. He autoclaved it. And then he took the broken glass, put in the broken glass, liquid went down the EDS system. Then he just had to explain why he was laying on his face on the floor back in the lab. So yeah, that was what he ended up doing. But this is designed for simplicity. The product, because it's impermeable, all your sharps, your pipettes, your pipettes, anything that's sharp that would go through a bag will not go through that. As some of you have seen, I've taken a screwdriver and stabbed it. It won't even put a mark in it. I've dropped it from a 2-story building with concrete and nothing. If it was filled with anything, you can walk off and pick it up and be gone. But it's designed to open up during the process. Once the autoclave starts, then it opens up. It allows that direct steam and heat to come in. Now you don't have to worry about bags being open, closed, anything rupturing on the inside. And with this product, at the end of the cycle, let's say the autoclave failed. They never fail, but just in case one actually does break down, the valves shut back up, you can pull it out. Now you can store it, take it somewhere else into another autoclave. It goes back to being airtight. You stick in another autoclave, restart, and away you go. And at the end of the cycle, everything's done. And then, of course, we now have the ability to test with the BIs. I have a BI insertion point, so you can pull the BI out, run your BI before you ever expose yourself to the load. Now you can know that the contents are dead through your BI, and then without ever opening up the container.
I have a relevant question.
Yes, ma'am.
From online, is it why the Safe-Decon guy failed on cycle 7 gravity?
Yes, I can. And again, this comes down to basic steam penetration. As I explained in the beginning, those packs are like just like the Bowie Dick, and it was a gravity cycle. When I packed it, it was very dense and tight. You'll notice that it passed on the pre-vac because you're able to push the steam in, and then you vacuum it out, and then you turn it back to steam. Again, that liquid is going to seal off any heat from penetrating. On a gravity cycle, you have to remember it's just going up. You're not getting any conditioning at all. So eventually what happens is as the steam comes in, it tries to penetrate the pack, but because it's dense and it was packed down, it only went just in so far. And enough to get steam, but not enough to kill the biological. And again, these tapes that everybody's like, oh, I use the tapes, Bob. Please don't. I just demonstrated that is not going to work. So you want them BIs, especially for things that you want. So, yes, ma'am.
Question from online. Here's a comment and a question. Biological indicators are really expensive to run with every load. What do you recommend in place of chemical strips?
If you're going to run a BI, well, if you're going to run the chemical strips, you're still, as you can see by my data, you're risking possible exposure and infecting. So if you're, as the question is, I know they're very expensive. BIs are very, very expensive, but I guess it is doctor bills more expensive, getting somebody sick. So is it worth risking something cheaper that's giving you a false negative and end up being positive in a potential exposure? And I've been exposed, like I said, multiple times, once with an incurable TB and didn't get it, but it had to be quarantined for a couple of days. But this is the thing, these are things you have to make sure of, because as soon as it comes out of that back, there's no bioseal, there's no air vents, there's no nothing. And these are where, you know, I've worked in facilities that were working on influenza. Within 24 hours of leaving the facility, guess what I had? I ended up with the flu. And it was every year. And I know where I got it from, you know. So yes, you're using the strips. They used the strips for the influenza, but they were stacking it up, and that's what ended up happening. So, yep,
We do one more. One more question.
sure.
Comment and a question. Sealing bags is important for instruments or when you need the contents to be sterile. Do you recommend opening bags containing waste or when maintaining sterility? Or when maintaining sterility is not a consideration?
Say that I know that they wanted to close the bag, and if you're using instruments, if you're sterilizing them, they should be left open in some way. And any instrument you want to, when you autoclave it, obviously you want it done, especially depending on what you're working on. You want that exposure because then you can clean it afterwards. So if you're doing your instruments, yes, open the bag. As you can see, the more exposure, direct exposure to steam and heat from the autoclave, the better off you're going to be.